There was one guy I was dealing with getting a little bit pissy over the kid interrupting the call thing, and I'm like,
Cheerio!
appreciate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, please. Yeah.
My bad. Please continue. It's very alliterative.
They are going to be the ones powering the experiences that every customer has.
Preference has power. I'm pretty sure Cato would say to me when I do every show, stop.
I think he would.
Those peeps are popping. Wait till you get the invoice.
Here. I have a question. When's the last time you danced? When's the last time you laughed?
Right now. I don't want to dance with you.
When's the last time you flew a kite?
Toasted Oreo.
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
How did I do that?
insane. You're insane.
Well, hello everybody. How the hell are you? How's your heart? I hope it is beating. I hope it is pumping with energy, with passion, because it is time for another episode of the show, Late Night JAFFE, placeholder name. Watch the space. A new name is coming. Mr. David Libby is here. He is watching. Stephen Rubin is S. Oh, he's watching. I don't even know what S is. Anna Bowman is here. She finally got Annika to sleep, which is awesome. And she's here, and that makes me happy. And Manif is here, but unfortunately, everyone's still awake. Well, that's okay. Tell him to come and watch the show. Michael Brito says, did you upgrade your hardware? Are you referring to me? Are you referring to my heart? I don't know that our heart would be considered to be hardware, but it is 33 days to heart surgery. You got the countdown, and hopefully it is the countdown just to a new phase. 33 days before they repair a mitral valve prolapse. And before that happens, we're going to have a lot of fun. The rally, well, first of all, Ethereum, Bitcoin, Dogecoin, crypto, it's all pretty much in the crapper at the moment. But even the rally website is down at the moment, but that's only for maintenance. But when it's up again, and it should be up again, maybe by the time the show is done, I've created a whole suite of, it's kind of like a GoFundMe meets crypto meets streaming, ways that you can interact with me, with the show, ways that you can get benefit from the show, and at the same time, perhaps support me for 250 past episodes, and hopefully another 250, 2,500, or even 25,000 to come in the future. That is my hope as well. 10% of anything that I raise on my Rally website through my Creator Coin, I'm going to donate to the Mitral Foundation. May as well pay it forward. And I think that's been the motto of the last year and a half through this show. But let's get on with the show. Today is National Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Day. National Be a Millionaire Day. So I'm not sure if you're going to get it through crypto at the moment, but I hope you earn that $1 million, or just million, whatever the unit is. Maybe it's 1 million units of happiness. And maybe it's something you might have to negotiate for, and more on that soon. It's also National Streaming Day. So dream big and stream big, whether that is for 1 million views or 1 million likes or 1 million follows, or maybe it's just 1 million smiles. But happy National Streaming Day as well. I want to wish a happy birthday to Nancy Wilson, to Chris Hong, and to Marcus John Henry Brown, previous guest on the show. What an amazing. So for tomorrow, a few happy birthdays. Mr. Basil Katz, or Basil Katz. No, there's no Basil Katz. Basil's what you eat. Basil Katz, Joan Gilman, Tim Hayden. Hope you guys have an amazing day leading into your weekend. Little sneak preview for next week. We got a little bit of everything. We got bookmarks again. We got Shingy on Monday and Bob Garfield, the Bob Garfield, on Thursday. Mr. Garfield's been in the news over the last week or so, and he's going to be coming in. I don't know what he's going to talk about, but I do always enjoy spending time with him. And Joe Polizzi has just re-released, or a new edition of his incredible book. He's going to be coming in to talk about it on Tuesday. So there's a lot to look forward to. And on May 27th, on Thursday at 9, the new and improved show launches with a new name and even new minty breath fresh flavor. You can actually smell the show. It smells good. It smells fresh. So that is next week. But tonight, Fotini Iconomopoulos, author, global speaker, negotiation advisor, and casual clubhouse visitor, will be on the show. And we had a bit of fun earlier this morning on Instagram Live, and I can't wait for her to come in to the show. Manif says, my tiny JAFFE investment is still 10x'd in a couple of months. Well, great, because mine has halved in the past week. But that's amazing, actually, that you've 10x'd it in a couple of months. Even, is that, Manif, even after the little bit of downturn? That's amazing. So I'm glad that you're making a little bit of money. That makes me feel pretty happy. Well, now it is time for our seated soliloquy. And the seated soliloquy today is called Negotiate, because that's kind of the flavor of what we're going to be talking about. It is time to negotiate with the seated soliloquy. And this is the music that I selected for you. Off the bat, let me just say that I suck at negotiating. And that's not a bluff. For those of you looking to sponsor the show, maybe in JAFFE coin, I'm not softening you up or waiting for you to lower your guard. I'm not a ringer. I just find selling to be really, really hard. And a big part of that process is negotiation. For example, I don't understand going into negotiation with a buffer or padding greater than what I would ultimately want or even settle for. Why not just go in with a realistic and honest ask in the first place? Well, that was somewhat rhetorical. The answer, of course, is that the other person is expecting you to come in with something higher and therefore going to negotiate you down regardless. It's part of the game. In the corporate use case, people in purchasing or procurement are incentivized based on taking 10 to 15% off the top as what is essentially the cost of doing business. Now, I've tried many techniques and I suck at all of them as well. What's your budget? Let's use the honor system. If you think I'm coming in too high, let me know. But similarly, if you think I'm coming in too low, will you let me know as well? I'm sure my guest tonight, Fotini, is cringing and groaning in the green room as I speak. Now, for the record, I've yet to have one prospective client come back with a higher offer because I came in too low. I'm just so confused. So here are a couple of others, right? Don't ever name a price in the first conversation. When you do, stay silent. The first person to talk loses. Don't ever name your price and then immediately say, but if that doesn't work for you, we can figure out something out. I'll work with you. I am guilty on all counts. Some people say that the hallmark of a great negotiation is that both sides feel they won. My brother-in-law says it's when both sides feel like they got screwed. Now, he's an incredibly successful businessman and a tough negotiator, by the way. I once read a book, I think it was called Power Negotiating. It explained how the solution to almost every negotiation is to meet in the middle. And then Chris Voss comes along with his book titled Never Split the Difference. Is that the same thing or two different things? Like I said, I'm so confused. I do wonder if there's a better way forward. I suspect there is. A win-win outcome that is based and built on mutual benefit and even empathy. Now, that is one negotiating table I'd be happy to join. But in the interim, as the old saying goes, a man can dream. And now it's time for Fotini to come onto the show. And Fotini, I got this music for you. A little bit of background. Fotini Iconomopoulos is a global recognized high-stakes negotiator and highly sought-after keynote speaker. For the last decade, Fortune 500 companies have repeatedly relied on unique negotiation strategies and dynamic communication skills to help broker major deals and empower their employees to reach company objectives. Outside of a high-profile consultancy role, she teaches MBA students at York University's Schulich School of Business and guest lectures at leading universities across North America. She's a frequent guest for CBC and CTV and has been featured in a number of key publications, including Forbes and the Harvard Business Review. Among her many accomplishments, she's been recognized with the New Impact Award for inclusion from the Network of Executive Women, as well as a 40 Under 40 award from the Greek American Foundation. She lives in Toronto, where she is locked down as we speak, but now she gets to be free. Fotini, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be locked down with you tonight.
Well, you are free. You've been liberated. So wait, you've won 40 under 40, which means you'll win 50 under 50. You know, 60 under 60. I'm still holding out. I'm now holding up for the 60 under 60. I think the good news is that the number increases, so I have a slightly better chance. Well, how was your day? Because I know that your day has been filled with. I hope you haven't had an allergic reaction to me.
No, I'm hoping it's not you, at least, because I know that a bunch of people I've been on camera all day today in interviews, and everybody's been complaining about pollen and allergies. So my apologies if I sound stuffed up. I am not sick. It is indeed allergies.
Well, I have to tell you that the one thing that I have not been, since about March of last year is sick. But that's what happens when you basically don't leave the house.
Yeah.
A little bit of Allegra goes a long way.
Indeed. I have not left my house in 3 days, so it is impossible for me to be sick.
So, Fotini, we've got a lot to get to today, and Mr. Bill Guertin is here. Bill, I am still trying to eradicate my memory of our karaoke, where I got to sing Take On Me and Somebody to Love and demonstrate my poor falsetto. But Bill says negotiation is far easier when you understand what your counterpart wants to accomplish versus what you want and help them to get there. It will be fun to hear how your guest approaches it. No doubt, no doubt. So Fotini, we're going to get into negotiation in a moment. But first, I need to negotiate with you the ability to share a couple of fun facts, maybe embarrassing facts about you in a section that we call very profoundly named Fun Facts. So
it's hard to embarrass me. I don't have a lot of regrets in my life.
Well, as long as you don't regret coming on the show, I think you will be fine. So here's what we learned about you, which is, and can you believe we actually got this photo? You used to sing in coffee houses. So tell us about that story. And when you say sing in coffee houses, you mean you just spontaneously burst into song, or like this, kind of like, Phoebe and Friends singing Smelly Cat?
It was more like the Phoebe and Friends, but they were not original songs. I don't have the creative genius that is Smelly Cat. So it was limited to, I was in university at the time, and a friend of mine on campus had a guitar, and every time there was like a karaoke night on campus, he would play, and then we ended up doing coffee houses in the area because that was just the thing that you did when you were a university student.
All right, so we are gonna let you off the hook and not put you on the spot and expect you to sing for your supper. I on the other hand, and I will raise a glass to you. My doctor did say that I could only have one glass of alcohol every night, so I just filled it up really, really full. I think this is more like a carafe, a mini carafe. So cheers to you, Fotini, and to your new book.
Thank you very much.
All right. So what else did we find out about you? We sent our detectives into the field, And this is an interesting one. By the way, sometimes these things are interesting, and I think to myself, how am I going to portray this? How am I going to send my private investigators in the field to snap a photograph of this moment, this candid photo? And this is what we learned. My fridge and cupboards are almost entirely empty, especially pre 2020. So we actually have a photo of this. And can you believe that that can you believe that the poor dog came to you to get a bone and unfortunately despaired because the cupboard was bare or something like that, and the poor dog got none. Fotini, why do you have nothing in your cupboards?
I haven't worn that outfit in a really long time.
It's a
Because
very
so
talented dog, I might say, though.
well, pre 2020, I was always on the road, so that it wasn't even a question. Like I was home maybe a couple of days a week, so anything that I had at home would be spoiled. And since being home for the longest stretch in well over a decade, I haven't really lost that habit. So I do cook, pretty much every day, but I eat fresh foods only. I rid myself of the habit of having any packaged food in the house. And my niece, who's a teenager, comes to stay with me from time to time. And every time she comes to stay, I have to explicitly go out to the grocery store to find food for her because we have such different habits. So I'm just not in the habit of having a properly stocked kitchen at any time. I think anybody who loves cooking at home would be sorely disappointed in what I have to offer.
Well, of course, the whole world, it's so weird. Like when we think about the events of the last year and change, um, food played a very interesting role. On one hand, takeouts and having stuff delivered and meal programs and packaged meals and food master classes. Food played an unbelievably front of center and active role. People putting on weight, eating too well. But the idea of like staying at home and cooking, well, I mean, they were staying at home. That almost seemed to kind of disappear into the background, that there were just more options, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I never really fell into that habit of what everybody else did in 2020 with the whole baking bread thing. I think I've just been out of habit for such a long time when it comes to cooking that I think I lost my domestic abilities. I joke about it, but I honestly don't remember foods that I used to be able to make because food is such a big part of the Greek culture. And I was raised, with very, very traditional Greek parents. And if you've ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, that gives you some insight into how I was raised. So we used to show our love through food. And yet, that it's like it almost is erased from my memory after not having done anything about it for 10 years. And now that everybody's spending so much more time at home, I feel like all of my friends have become personal chefs, and I'm still going, nope, not getting that skill back. I'm stuck.
So is the concept of Uber Eats and the Greek culture, is that like a yellow card offense? Is that you have to go to the what do they call it in? I mean, you live in Canada. What do they call it in ice hockey when you have to
Oh,
sit?
you're asking the wrong person.
Oh, good. Well, me too.
Like the penalty box or something like that, I think.
The penalty box.
Yeah, so it's a bit different because so my grandmother, of course, who is still in Greece, she knows how to make everything, and my mother's a good cook and a great baker. But I live in Toronto, whereas my family lives out in Niagara, so about an hour away from me. And so being in such a big city with a huge Greek population, I have everything at my fingertips. So I have a Greek bakery and I have all of these things. And even my grandmother would say to this day over in Athens, she's like, I don't need to do any of the baking anymore. I'm just going to walk down the street to the patisserie where they do a really good job of everything. And so she picks those things up. And every time I go home to visit, whether it's my parents or my extended family, I take orders like bring home the Greek cheese, bring home these pastries, bring home all of these things. So I kind of get a free pass when it comes to not cooking because they know I'm going to bring something that's even better than anything I would make.
All right, so we're not going to let people get too hungry, licking their lips as they hear an entire show about food, but we want them to be hungry in a negotiating setting. You join an elite group of people that published a book in the past, year or so. And so, first of all, congratulations. I believe it's your first.
It is, and it may be my last after this experience.
I'm just, I know I'm a bit of a broken record, but I was told, I've published 5, and I was told, and I can say this is true, that they people told me it's like birthing a child. Of course, how would I know? And I wouldn't know, because it is painful, and you decry and you swear that you will never publish another one or have another child, and then you do. So, I have good news and bad news for you. Maybe it's the same piece of news. You will publish more books, and it will be no less painful, but it is worth it. It really is.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I mean, every author I know says it's torturous to write, and of course, I can empathize with all of them. And I think it's the same mentality that you have when, if you've ever run a marathon, you think I'm never going to do this again. And I have not run my second marathon. I had run my first. My second, actually, I had signed up for, knowing I was going to do it, but I ended up being injured. So I walked a second marathon instead of ran a second marathon. But I still did it, even though at the end of it, I was like, never doing this again. It's so much pain. When you're in the throes of all of the agony of all of it, you say you're never going to do it, and yet, I've done the laps a few times. So we'll see what happens with the book. We'll see if I have more content to share with the world, because I packed this one with a lot of stuff.
And I will come back to that in 1 second. Manif says, or starting a business. That's true. I mean, I've started 3, and I really should have quit after the first one. But Manif, that is because starting a business, and I guess writing a book, and I guess running a marathon is reserved for a special group of people known as masochists.
Indeed.
It's all the same one. Now, if you are a marathon running entrepreneurial author, you're basically screwed. You really hate yourself. You really hate yourself. I've run 2, by the way. I've run the New York Marathon twice. And I was just talking about it today. I don't know that I'll ever run another marathon, just because of like injuries and stuff like that. And now I have a heart issue. But wow, that experience, and the New York Marathon, I will never forget it.
New York was my first marathon as well, and I don't know that I would even considered a second one if it wasn't because it was so magical. The people, the boroughs, like the
Amazing,
entire
right?
experience was so incredible. The second one I did was also in New York, but it was like a moonlight walk. We were raising money for cancer, so we walked around the entire perimeter of the island. And I would tell you that the walk was far more painful than the run was, because you're just prolonging the pain with the walk versus getting it done a little bit faster by running.
There is one. It's not a marathon, but there is a race. I think it's like, it takes place in the village, where you do laps, and I think you have to, every lap you do, it's like around a city block or something, where you have to drink a beer and eat it like a Krispy Kreme donut. And you have to do like 12 laps or something like that. Now, that is my kind of race, to be honest.
I don't know. We have races like that in Toronto, and I've always been warned, don't wear your favorite shoes because they're not going to look very good after that.
Yeah, for many, many reasons.
Exactly.
So you learned, unfortunately, the hard way. I would have given you this advice, but now I'm a sadist and a masochist, because I would have taken joy in giving you this advice. I'm kidding. But that it was one of the things that blew me away, that your work really only just begins when you actually finish the manuscript. It makes no sense.
Yep.
And yet those edits, the second, the third, the fourth edit, you become blinded almost by your own words. It's like a chef not wanting to eat their own food. What surprised you about the process? What did you learn about the process, and what did you learn about yourself?
I learned that you have to have really great editors, because you lose all objectivity. I mean, there were moments where I thought pieces were really good, and there were moments where I thought, how can I possibly publish this? Who is going to want to read this garbage? And then you have the objective people who are like, no, it's fine. You're going to be okay. So I learned that you really do have to have that fresh set of eyes on it, so that you don't get lost in the abyss or start circling the drain. And I was really fortunate, thanks to some mentors. I found an amazing editor, Catherine Oliver, who was just so supportive and so amazing at what she does. She also edited a bunch of Seth Godin's books, so I was really fortunate to have her talent helping me with it. But I also learned that you have to do a lot of work to get people to see the book. So everything in my career so far has been just me saying yes to opportunities. So it was yes to an opportunity to work for a company called L'Oreal when I left my MBA program. It was yes to joining a really interesting global training company that poached me to do negotiation training. It was yes when clients said, "Hey, I know you're not working for that company anymore, but we really want your help." And so I started a business, not because I intended to, but I kind of did it backwards until I had to get a real job. And when somebody from HarperCollins saw the video on a video of mine online somewhere, they said, "We think you have a book in you." And I went, "Okay." So it was just continuously saying yes to these things. And now I've never had to market myself. I didn't really have a website before this year. And now I just feel like there's a lot more work to make sure that all of this effort that you put into the books doesn't go to waste either, so that people can actually see it and get the benefit of the contents of it. So that has been, for someone who's not a marketer and who's never had to do anything like that, it's been an eye-opening experience, to say the least.
And it's funny because obviously the book is about negotiation, and here you are talking about saying yes to everything, and but there are two parts to it which I find fascinating. One is saying yes is I guess there are three parts. The first part is being open-minded, and being open to possibility and experimentation. The second, I guess, is positivity, being able to say yes and worry about the concerns and all the reasons, all the little niggly nagging no's that get in the way. And then the third is the implications on negotiation. Being someone that says yes all the time, how does that alter the perception when you do need to say no? So I would love for you to kind of bridge the idea of saying yes, because I'm a yes. I'm the same as you, and I don't think anyone should ever change. Does that compromise your ability to take a tough stance or position?
It doesn't, because as long as you remain in control of the yes. So it's yes on my terms, right? So if someone had said to me, "You need to have this written in 4 months," I would have been like, "You're crazy. That's never going to happen." It took me a whole year to write this book because I was working a full-time job and traveling globally while I did it. So it's going, yeah, if you can meet these conditions, then yes, I will do exactly what you want. But it's that I call them the four magic words of negotiation, because it's if you, then I. If you do this thing for me, then yes, I will do this thing for you. But you're taking care of your needs first in those first two, if you do this for me bit. And you can do the reverse order. You can say, "Yeah, I'll do that thing for you, but only if you do this thing for me." And now all of a sudden it sounds like a punishment instead of a gift. So it's understanding, what do I want out of this and what can they afford to do for me in this process? So what kind of conditional trading can I create in this? Because I don't think no is a bad word either. I think there's plenty of times where you need to say no, and without any explanation, without any justification. It's just, these are my boundaries and this is what I'm capable of right now. But if you want to say yes, there's no shame in that and there's no harm in it. In fact, there's lots of opportunities on the condition that you do it on your terms.
I love it. If you, then I, because for anybody that comes from the tech world, understands coding, the if then statement is one of the most pivotal basic elements of code. But the if you, then I is humanizes it and certainly puts the context in a negotiating context. And it may not be a win-win, but at least they're two sides, right? And there got to be two sides present in any negotiation for it to make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to consider, what is in the realm of possibility for the other person. So one of the people who commented earlier, you need to have an element of empathy. It's not so much that you become a victim of your own empathy and you lose sight of what you want, but you have to be able to be mindful of, who is this other person that I'm dealing with? What are their circumstances? And then asking also the question, what can they afford to do for me? What would work for both of us? And it may not be a win-win exactly. It might be you win some and I win more, but it very well could work for both parties. But you have to consider both people at the table. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to get them to agree to something and you're never going to end the negotiation.
I'm jotting that down. What can they afford to do for me? There's something that's so interesting. It's a customer or a negotiatee centric lens or negotiator. You know what I mean? But I think it's so funny. Everything always comes back to the magical E word. And it's not Evelyn. It is Evelyn. The magical E word is Evelyn, as in Evelyn is the star. Great editors were gold. I also found time away from the manuscript between revisions helped a lot. But of
Yeah.
course, the E word that I'm talking about is empathy. You don't normally hear about someone who's on the receiving end of a negotiation. You're negotiating, let's say, a salary increase or a job, actually trying to put yourself in the shoes of the person who is the decision maker. I find that to be quite an original thought.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was always so common sense, because why would they agree to it if they don't see the benefit for them? And if you can't see the benefit for them and frame it up for them and articulate it for them, then it's going to be a really tough hill to climb together. And so, even when I'm teaching my MBA students, their number one concern is always job offer negotiations. And how do I get them to want to give me a raise? And how do I get this thing that I want in this offer? And the number one question I have to pose back to them is, what's in it for them? Have you considered it from their perspective? Even today, when so many people well, not everybody, but most people are enjoying working from home or enjoy the benefits of at least working from home a few days a week. And a lot of people that I talk to are going, how do I get my employer to allow me to continue to work from home? And I have to ask them the question, what's in it for them? Can you demonstrate to them, hey, I've been so much more productive this way. I've been able to answer X number of more emails or get through this many more client calls. As soon as you can present to them something that is going to be a benefit to them, a why that is, from their perspective, valuable, then it's going to be so much easier to get your list of objectives out of them. But it's about finding that balance and that framing for folks. If you're just going in there and puffing your chest and saying, I'm demanding this and I want that, it looks really good in TV and movies, but the reality is that's not how most successful negotiations happen. And oftentimes people will say to me things like, oh, your life must be so exciting. It must be like that show Suits. And I'm like, actually, people come and see me way before it has to get to those points. The point is to prevent so much of that from happening. And that comes from thinking about the perspective of both parties without deprioritizing your needs in this situation. That's just simply a tool to be able to achieve your needs.
One of the things that I often struggle with myself is you're dealing with people, and I've had an entire career until I became a talk show host, where I was a consultant, or I had an agency, or I had my own boutique, or even as a speaker. And for me, it was always it was negotiating, but I would always have this I don't know if the word is arrogance or self entitlement, that the money, the budget, it wasn't theirs. It wasn't theirs. It was it was the company, or it was their bosses, but it wasn't theirs. It wasn't coming from their pocket. It wasn't the difference between putting food on their table. Whereas for me, it was very personal, and I almost took it personally. This is every single penny goes into my pocket, into my bank account, and oftentimes to the IRS as well. And I realize now how what a mistake that was, but I'm still not sure why. Maybe you can help me understand, like, what is wrong with this idea that says, hey, it's not like it's your money, right? So why are you being so difficult or tough in terms of negotiating for it, or on its behalf?
I mean, there's no right or wrong perspective around that. For me, when I do a lot of training, so I train a lot of clients. People bring me in to teach their teams how to be better negotiators. So it could be the sales teams, it could be the procurement teams, it could be the marketers. And part of what I teach them is to think about it as their own money. What would you do if that was your situation? Because if you're treating it frivolously, then you're probably not going to get the best deal. The flip side of that is I get to come in as somebody who's objective, who doesn't have any skin in the game. And so it's easier for me to have that objectivity. And I suspect those people, you're probably assuming that, well, it's not their money, therefore they shouldn't care all that much, or they probably don't care as much as I do. The reality is, I know when I was working in the industry, when I was working in manufacturing and so on, I took everything personally, not because it was my money. I knew it was the company's money and not mine, but it was my pride, my ego, all of those things on the line. So I treated it just as seriously as I would my own. And in fact, I find oftentimes I fight harder for my clients than I do for myself when it comes to some of those high stakes negotiations. So I don't think there's anything wrong with either of those perspectives, as long as it keeps that kind of fire in your belly to make sure that you're looking after your own needs.
I do like the fact that, again, I was thinking about it from my perspective, but the other side, I mean, what you really want is you want someone on the other end that really, to your point, is taking it personally, is negotiating on behalf of a budget that isn't theirs personally. However, if they can attach that connection to it, maybe in part emotional, it's a good thing. I really love this kind of this flip of perspective, so that it doesn't become one-sided. One of the things that probably I think of immediately in these scenarios is an imbalance of power. And let's start from, we'll start from the ridiculous, and then we'll get to the sublime. But I love this tweet. Salary negotiations are not hostage negotiations. Stop approaching them the same way. That is all. Fotini, over and out. So tell us about why the caps, Fotini.
For some reason, it's been coming up almost every single day. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I'm getting a lot of DMs in my social media these days, or I'm hearing from folks who are trying to renegotiate salaries right now. But there has been some not optimal advice out there in the market on how to handle negotiations in general. And there's two different schools of thought on who should go first. And the reality is, every single study I've ever seen and most anecdotal evidence points to the person who goes first gets the better deal. When you think of things in a hostage negotiation scenario, it would make no sense for me as the hostage negotiator to make the first offer to the person who's taking hostages. That would just be odd. There's no benefit to anchoring by me going first there. But this is not the same type of scenario. When you're talking about salary negotiations, there are no lives on the line. No one's threatening one another. It's not a threatening thing. It's not a short-term thing. It's actually a long-term thing where you're going to have to deal with this person for a very long time, whether they're the HR person or the hiring manager. You're going to have to face that person at work on a regular basis. It's not as soon as this negotiation's over, this person's going to jail or I'm never going to see them again. So there's all of these elements that go into it that you need to take into account in terms of your strategy and your behavior. So if you're going in there assuming let them make the first offer, odds are you're going to get a suboptimal deal. And I've heard lots of recruiters out there give the advice of wait for them to give you the range. The reason they're saying that is because who does that benefit? Is that benefiting you, the person who's going after the job, or is it the person who is offering the job? Because if I'm the one going after a job and I want to hit $100,000 salary, for example, and I wait for them to give me a range, and the range they want to give me is $70,000 to $80,000, I'm going to go, oh, well, that's really disappointing. I wonder how I can get them to come a little bit higher than that 80,000. Now the number in my brain is 80,000. So where does our brain go? Subconsciously, it goes to that imprint. First impressions are lasting impressions. Whereas had I gone first, I could say, look, my expectations are based on my research and so on, is 100 to 112,000. Now they're going to be going, oh, well, we were expecting to pay that person 80, but how close can we get her off of that $100,000 figure? I wonder how we can pull her off of that. Would she settle for 90? So there's a mentality, again, that first impression is a lasting impression. And in those types of negotiations where there is some back and forth, where there are long-term repercussions, where you want to be perceived as collaborative and somebody who is flexible and so on, you need to be the one that anchors first. Because it's like when you walk into a car dealership. And even if you've never been to a car dealership, I'm sure you've seen them on television where you see there's stickers on the windshield. As soon as you walk in there, you see the sticker on the windshield. That is their first offer. They're doing something called anchoring. They're leaving an impression on your subconscious brain. And now that is the number that is implanted on your brain. And you're thinking, oh, wow, that was more expensive than I wanted. I wonder how I could get them off of that $20,000 figure. I wonder how much lower they'd be willing to go than that $20,000 figure. The number you're thinking about is their $20,000 figure. So the person who goes first in negotiation, more often than not, is the one that gets the benefit of that first impression, and you'll get a lot closer to where you want to be if you have that first opportunity. If you're treating it like a hostage negotiation where it makes total sense to let the other person go first, the hostage taker, we're not dealing with people who are hostage takers. We're not dealing with people who are so self-interested. They have to be interested in what benefits you too, because they also need to build a long-term relationship with you. They also need to face you. They also have to make sure that this is fair and sustainable. Otherwise, they know they're going to lose you, and they're going to have to deal with turnover and then hiring costs again and all of those awful things. So it's a very different scenario. And yet I hear this terrible advice all the time going to job seekers to say, let them go first. The reason it comes up is because they're going, oh, what if I ask for something that's too much? Well, if you've prepared and if you've done your homework, which every negotiator should, then there's no reason why you would do something that's so pie in the sky. If you're going in there and you've done the market research that says this job, anybody who's a high end of the spectrum, like if you've got great experience and you're not an average person, you're an above average performer and you should be achieving $100,000. If you go in there asking for $200,000, they're going to laugh at you and never deal with you again. But that's a reflection of you not having done your homework. If you come in around that $100 figure, whether it's a $100,000 figure, whether it's 110 or 99 or whatever that number is, you're going to look really credible when it's based on objective data. But if you let them go first, it's going to be so much harder to pull them away from their figure. So you're going to have done your homework. You're not going to be pie in the sky. You're going to be somewhat realistic while still being ambitious and aspirational. So if you are basing this on real life information that is out there at our fingertips every single day on Google and PayScale and all of those things, they're the ones who are going to look foolish if they go, oh, whoa, you're too pie in the sky for us. They're going to look quite unfair in that realm. So you have a lot less to worry about given the power of knowledge that we have at our fingertips these days.
I do like what Manif said. He said, I believe that the holder of the value should go first, in this case, the employee. But either way, what you're referring to is being proactive and yet being realistic. And I think those 2 points, it's a hell of a 1-2 punch, which is come in, realistically and be proactive if in this particular case, anchoring, as you put it. But there's something that happens which I've come up with a name for it, Fotini. I call it the black hole of negotiation. And what I mean by the black hole, it's like you come up with a number. You want me to keynote your event with a custom presentation. This is my number. And then it's like they get sucked into the black hole because you never hear from them again. What happened to them? Where did they go? The ground swallowed them up whole. Why does this happen? Why do people just go completely dark? Well, I guess there's a new term for it, which is ghosting. Why do you get ghosted? Why are people not just, adult enough and secure enough just to say, wow, that was like ridiculous. That was 3 times. Is it an embarrassment or is it just, or are they offended? What's going on with the black hole of negotiation?
I mean, I wish I could dive into every single person's psyche, but I suspect it has a lot to do with ego. Maybe they are insulted. Maybe they go, oh, this is just a waste of time. There's no need for us to go any further. But what usually prompts it is actually a lack of action. So, you could be putting out a proposal that says, here's the total package. Let me know your thoughts. And this is a really big mistake that I see often happening is how do you end your proposal making stage, whether it's via email or phone and so on. I don't love doing negotiations over email. In fact, I discourage them because there is an opportunity for them to drop off the face of the earth. If you're doing it on the phone, they're not necessarily going to go radio silent or hang up on you. So you have the opportunity to get some live instant feedback. So even with my students, when they say, I got this offer, and it's extremely common to receive an offer from somebody over email. Even pre-pandemic, that was the norm when we could still see each other in person. But what I advise my students to do is to say, thank you for sending that through. I do have some questions. When's a good time for us to have a quick
Great.
conversation? I'm sure it'll be easier, much faster, more efficient for us to have a quick chat versus a ton of back and forth on this. So then they can, make their proposal, get the live feedback, and so on. If you're the person, like in our business world, those of us who are entrepreneurs, we're often sending out proposals, and it usually has to be in a document with lots of details and so on and so forth. If you want to prevent them from being able to go radio silent, then we need to think about, how do we finish that proposal, that email? And so instead of let me know your thoughts, it's here's what, based on what I've understood from you and your needs, here's what I've put together. If I've misunderstood something, I'd be happy to go back and review. Would love to get your feedback on this. When's a good time for us to follow up on this? Or, something to that effect. By asking a question, this is straight out of the Robert Cialdini Persuasion Handbook. But by asking a question, you are tapping into the social norm of, I guess I'm supposed to answer that question now. I'm going to feel like a jerk if I don't answer the question. But if you finish your note with, let me know your thoughts, I'll let you know my thoughts when I have time. You fall into the bottom of my priority list. I have a million different emails to go through and so on. It's easy for me to use that as a scapegoat to not have to answer you, because there's no call to action. But when the phone rings, if there's a call to action, I feel as though I am compelled socially to pick it up. And so there's an element of, how am I forcing that gravitational pull of communication to come back and continue this? In fact, even on my own proposals, when I'm sending everything out, the very last paragraph before I sign off on the actual document itself, I say, this is a discussion document. If there is more information to be had, if there are different changes that need to be made, the purpose of this is the beginning of a discussion, and I welcome any feedback on this. And then in the email, when I send out the document itself, it's, when's a good time for us to follow up? Or even before I send it out, sometimes I'll have a follow-up meeting already set in advance. So I'm going to send you a bunch of stuff. I want you to review it. Why don't we put something in the calendar now, and that'll give you enough time to review it, and then I can answer your questions about it, because I'm sure there's going to be some questions.
I love it. And, in my mind, all I'm thinking is, the other day I received an email from a Nigerian prince about $50 million. And I made the mistake of saying, I'd like to negotiate a higher percentage, but I sent it back by email and they disappeared. So now, thank you, Fotini. You've helped me see the light.
I've just helped you make $50 million.
I mean, it is like, I guess, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Day. So I appreciate that. So it's interesting. Anna Bowman said, the future is female, not only female, but sometimes we're a bit better at listening on a different level for whatever reason. But here's an interesting thing, and this is something else that was on your mind, which is, often there is an imbalance of power. And I alluded to it earlier with respect to hostage negotiations, but there's another one as well, which is something that I know is, it's going to prompt you to use caps again, which I love it when you use caps. But I think there is such disparity in the workplace and in the workforce on so many levels, in terms of hiring, in terms of representation, in terms of equity, in terms of inclusivity, but also in terms of negotiation. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Obviously, this has been on your mind, this piece of research. But is it true that do women have an advantage inherently in a negotiation? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the subject, because it's so important.
So there's two answers to this. It's a double-edged sword. So women actually are better negotiators than men are. And that has a lot to do with biology as well. So there's a different skill set. Women are often known to have better soft skills and so on, that empathy thing, the nurturer, whatever it is. We have different hormone levels, and that prompts a different emotional response in many cases. So there actually is science behind my statement of, I do believe women are better negotiators, because they build trust really well. They listen much more effectively. They have empathy. There's a difference in terms of the arrogance and things like that come across. However, despite all of that, thanks to gender bias, which is still very much a thing in our society, they are treated differently in negotiations. So about less than 20 years ago, I think it was in 2001 or 2003, there was a study done on MBA grads coming out of school and how many of them negotiated their first salaries. And what they found was only 7% of women negotiated their first salaries, whereas men were 57%.
Wow.
And so that's a pretty significant thing. And even today, I still have MBA students reaching. I'm not teaching this semester, and I still have students reaching out to me all the time asking me. And every time I've taught a class during my office hours, it was never men who were coming to see me. It was always women. And they were coming to see me specifically about job offer negotiations because they were fearful. Their biggest concern was, what if they rescind the offer? Because somebody in your network knows somebody who's had the offer rescinded just for negotiating. It's an unfortunate circumstance, but study after study shows us that women indeed are treated differently, not just by men. So you might say, okay, men treat women poorly. That is not the case. Women also discriminate against other women when it comes to negotiating. So for some reason in our society, there's this embedded bias of going, you're asking for more, but you're a woman. You shouldn't be asking for more. I don't know if it's for some reason we're trapped in 1956 and we assume that the little woman should be satisfied by just being out of the house and out of the kitchen. But unfortunately, there still are remnants of that bias, even though we've made progress. There's never been an identical study done to the one in 2001, but I've seen lots of statistics that are now telling us that especially younger women are negotiating at almost the same pace, if not the same as their male peers. However, they're not necessarily getting the same results. And as you saw in the tweet that I was quoting there, we have a fantastic investigative reporter here in Canada named Robin Doolittle. And she's been doing a series in Canada over the last few months about the power gap. And so it's just been one article after another highlighting the fact that women simply aren't making the same amount of money in similar roles. There's no other reason for it. They've stripped away all of the external factors. There was a massive expose on legal firms, our equivalent of Wall Street here in Toronto, and how they were underpaying women. We have what we call the sunshine list in every province here, where government roles, anybody over 100,000 is listed on this sunshine. You can look up; it's transparent in every province. You can see what everybody's making if they work for the provincial government. We don't have it at the federal level, and so we're lacking transparency. And without that transparency, it's going to be very difficult for women to be able to achieve those same things. The reason behind this book is, when I first had HarperCollins approach me about it, I was so excited because it was exciting news, and I was teaching at the time. And one of the first people I told was a colleague of mine at work. And he was somebody who's quite experienced in the field as well and done a lot of studies and helped write a textbook and all of that stuff. And he said, "What is there left to say about negotiation?" And I said, "Something that's not written by an old white dude." And the point of the story was simply that we need this other framing. We need this voice, because I've read some really wonderful books on negotiation. There are some fantastic things out there. I read everything I can get my hands on, but I've read a lot of them and said 80% of this is great, and the other 20% would never work coming out of my mouth. And so I know from anecdotal experience as well as from research that there is indeed differences for women. So my goal with the book is I use the analogy of the on-ramp versus the stairs. The majority of the population can use the stairs. Those of us who are privileged can use the stairs, but everybody can use the on-ramp. And so I found most of those books that I was reading were like the stairs. And my hope is that this book gives everybody tools that they can use, no matter who you are, no matter what your background, whether you're a woman or a man, a woman of color or a woman of privilege. You're going to find tools in here that will work for you, versus some of the stuff that I've seen out there before that goes, yeah, that would be okay, but I don't have the white hairs on my head, or I'm not a man and that doesn't work for me, or I don't belong to that dominant group. And so the hope was, if I could find the lowest common denominator in terms of lack of privilege, then what works for that person works for everybody, but the reverse isn't necessarily true. So there's a lot of progress we still have to make in our society. The glass ceiling is still there, but I do believe it's cracking or it's moving, but we have so much more to do. And that has implications when it comes to the negotiation space specifically.
And I think, to your point, negotiation and negotiating is a pivotal part of this journey. And we look at stats and we say what percentage of the workforce are male versus female or a C-suite, and that's of course important. But inherent in all of that is a negotiation at some point, where people should be not just hired, but also compensated based on their merit, and not biased against, based on their gender or any other irrelevant differentiator. And by irrelevant, I mean it should not bias. There should not be one group. Let's go back to the old white dudes that are favorably selected, recruited, compensated, incentivized, promoted. And I was thinking of this term right at the beginning, even in my soliloquy, this idea of servant negotiation, right? Or servant negotiate, like a servant leadership or servant authorship, as Anne Janza would talk about. Why not servant negotiation, where we truly can apply that empathy role, put ourselves in the other's shoes, but specifically redress the imbalances of power. So I love how you've decided to come in and focus on, the on-ramp versus the stairs. And quite frankly, Fotini, I'm sure you'd agree, in many cases, it's not even just stairs. It's about an elevator or a private elevator that goes right to the penthouse floor. But fantastic. And I really do appreciate that. Manif says, coming from a less represented background, I believe that this book will be very helpful getting the audiobook. So did you narrate the audiobook?
I wish I could have. Unfortunately, due to restrictions in my country, it wasn't possible for me to do the production, but I did select the narrator. So hopefully she's as close to how I would do it as possible. And maybe for the next one, when timing is a little bit better, I'll be able to do the production myself. But I appreciate the comment from Monif, and I do hope that it is helpful.
That's wonderful. Anna Bowman says, "Holy cow, we are already almost at the end. Time flies when you're having fun." And I would say time flies when you're actually learning a lot, being educated, and getting such smart insights. So Fotini, I appreciate this, and I appreciate you so much. I found this quote. This is the quote that I found for you in particular. A negotiator should observe everything. You must be part Sherlock Holmes, part Sigmund Freud. And this was said, when I saw the name of who said this, I was like, wait a second, Victor Kiem. Do you remember who Victor Kiem was? I remember growing up in South Africa. He was Remington, I guess, Blades, or, he was like I think he owned the company, or he was the CEO of the company.
Oh.
But he was on television. He was the spokesperson for Remington Blades or shavers or something like that. It certainly dates someone who's winning an award for 40 under 40. I'll tell you that much. And it's not an old white dude. But I like the idea, and I also thought of Scott Monty, because he loves Sherlock Holmes. What do you think about this idea of like what both by the way, old white dudes, but how would you put together the persona of the perfect negotiator?
I think the quote is fantastic. I mean, the whole point of the title, Say Less, Get More, is not only to say fewer words, because we can get ourselves into trouble by thinking and talking at the same time, but it's also taking the time to go, what's happening right now? Because if knowledge is power, then yes, you need to be observing everything, both what they're saying to you and what they're not saying, because people send us messages all the time.
Right.
And then it's being able to say less and take a moment to interpret what it is that's actually happening. So I think it was a perfect quote to end with, because that is the reason why I named the book what I did.
And of course, we were having fun a little bit earlier, which is the idea of Hamilton, which has a very special place in your heart. But of course, in Hamilton, it was talk less, smile more. And in this particular case, we've got a better play on that, which is say less, get more. Unconventional negotiation techniques to get you what you want, or to get what you want. Get you what you want. You're going to get what you want if you buy this book. You can connect with Fotini on LinkedIn. You can try and remember this. Pause the video. and go check out her channel on YouTube. It's easy. It's UCYICQRLMNLOP QWERTY. You can go and sing and duet a little sea shanty with Fotini on TikTok. Fresh from the coffee shop. Connect with her on Instagram, on Clubhouse, on Twitter. And by the way, Fotini, you are going to be, if you will be back next Friday, my new community format where we bring back previous guests. If he's available, you'll be on the same show as Mr. Robert Cialdini.
Oh, that's amazing. He's like one of my idols, so that would be fantastic.
He was on the show on Monday, actually. So hopefully things will work out. Fotini, it was a real pleasure. I wish you luck, deserved, not that you'll need it, deserved success, health, happiness, no hay fever, freedom from your apartment, full cupboards with lots of food products, in particular Greek products as well. Did I leave anything out?
No, I think you've covered all of it, and I appreciate your attention to detail.
Wonderful. And of course, we always end the show with the Grand Warden, as I call him, of the show, who gets to tell you whether you succeeded in your negotiation. Of course, Mr. Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
He says, mission accomplished. Take care, everyone. I will be on Clubhouse tomorrow with the guests from last week, and I will be back on Monday. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.